The American empire is over. We're done. We peaked about 12, 15 years ago, and we are on a down. And it's very hard for the American people, which I understand. I am one. It's hard to get your head around that. We've had a century of on the way up, which is a lot more fun than on the way down. But it does happen to every empire. We're only the latest. Look at the British, how far they've fallen. We're in that process. So the problem with the trickle down is, yeah, there might be more jobs, but they're going to be created in China. They're going to be created in Brazil. They're going to be created in India. They're not created here. Again, and I know this is difficult for people to hear. This is a cut based on desperation.
So I think we can all agree at this point that the U.S. is in serious decline. I've talked about it from the standpoint of education. I've talked about it from the standpoint of economy. You could talk about it from the standpoint of just about any way that we meet people's needs in this country. People are not getting their needs met. It's hard to say when this decline started. I think you could say that it even started in the 1970s, but I think it became apparent in 2016 when we democratically elected a right-wing demagogue, which is what countries in decline do. And I've been pretty clear since about last summer or so that my continuing to stay in this country is a choice to go through a very difficult time in history. And I also understand that the choice to stay is itself very privileged. And I guess I'm making this video partly as a caution and partly as a call to action. As a country declines, there is this pattern of insane concentration of wealth, and those who own the wealth start to engage in a lot of corruption in order to keep the wealth going. And where there once was order and maybe some facade that there was not that much corruption, that is all gone. And the people who are in the middle and the upper middle economically start to get swallowed up by the wealth inequality. And the typical reaction of people who are supposed to have privilege in the society is that they will fight very hard to maintain that position. And so my caution is to let you know that we are not at that place in history where we elect a different representative. We're at that part of history where we rewrite the way that government works, the way that education works, the way that economy works. It's a much bigger change. We're waiting and holding on while this current thing crumbles. We're not building anything. And for those of us who are more privileged, it is time for us to let go of our privilege and some belief that we are supposed to have more money than the people who are marginalized in our society. One of the ways that marketing gets at us is that it throws the wealth inequality in our face and tells us that we need to pretend that we have more money than we have. And most people are just going around pretending.
For quite some good time now, experts have been warning that the US is slowly declining. Not collapsing overnight, but declining economically, demographically, that is in terms of population, and therefore, structurally. And maybe most people ignored these warnings because maybe, America has always been too big to fail, or America is the superpower, something. But now these conversations are no longer just coming from these so-called experts, but even from everyday Americans. They're saying the same thing. And of course, economists are warning of, the decline in the, economy of the US. Government projections themselves are showing the same. And demographic researchers are also showing that US is declining in terms of population and therefore the workforce, And really right now, the question is no longer, is America powerful? Because yes, we can say America is still very, very powerful. But the real question is America still as untouchable right now as it has always been or as it used to be? Yeah, so this is a very interesting conversation that I want us to have open-mindedly. Let's listen to some of the videos I'm going to share here keenly and try to analyze. Do share with me what you think in the comment section below at the end of this. And let's watch, and I'll be back with some good analysis.
America is shrinking in 2025 for the first time in 250 years. Even though births are exceeding deaths by about 500,000 people, immigration to the U.S. is collapsing. The foreign-born population dropped by over 1 million people in the first half of 2025 because of either deportation or because they just left on their own. And new immigrants are not coming to replace them. And if these statistics bear out for the full year, the U.S. is on pace for a population decline. Never, ever, ever has that happened in the history of the United States of America. Even during the Civil War, when 700,000 soldiers died, the population went up. Even during COVID, when nobody could even move from country to country, the population went up. And a shrinking population is not just a number. It means fewer workers to support Social Security, fewer workers' taxes to help pay for schools and healthcare, slowing down economic momentum, less people to innovate, spend. Is this a bad thing for the United States?
When historians look back, 2026 is going to be considered to be the beginning of the end of the United States as a superpower. It hasn't even been 1 month, and already we've had 5 major events. The first is, despite the kidnapping of President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, nothing's actually changed in Venezuela. In fact, the kidnapping was so unpopular that Venezuelans in the country, including the opposition, rallied around the government. Now, Trump keeps bragging how he's going to get all this free oil from Venezuela. That's not true. The oil, yes, is being sold at a discount, but Venezuela is actually getting some of that revenue. Already, they've actually apparently gotten $300 million worth of it. The second has to do with Canada. We saw Prime Minister Mark Carney go to China. And this is quite shocking because Canada is often considered to be the closest ally of the United States. And of all the countries in the world, is actually the most reliant on the United States for trade. But Trump's threats to annex the country has greatly angered Canadians, leading Prime Minister Carney to go to China to hopefully boost trade. And in that meeting, it was actually largely successful. The two countries agreed to drop tariffs against each other, and Canada actually plans to increase its exports to China by 50% over the next 4 years, and in doing so is distancing itself from the United States. The third has to do with Iran. At the height of the Iran protests, it seemed Trump was going to bomb the country. Now, this is not something I support, but if there was a time it was going to happen, that probably would have been it. Because as the protests were growing, a lot of Iran's security forces were distracted and thus would have had a hard time resisting the United States. But Trump chickened out, and the Iranian government still remains. And now that the protests have died somewhat, Iran's even more prepared should the United States decide to attack it. The fourth has to do with this whole thing regarding Greenland. Trump keeps saying he wants to annex Greenland, and this has alienated the Europeans, which until recently were some of the closest allies of the United States. And already the Europeans have retaliated at least somewhat, with pension funds in Denmark and Sweden selling their US dollars. This is actually a very significant move because when you sell the US dollars, the value of the dollar goes down, and therefore this actually undermines the United States' financial hegemony as well as the US economy. Now, Trump has apparently backed down from annexing Greenland as of the time of filming of this video, but the damage to the US dollar has already been done. Fifth and finally, absolutely my favorite, is the fact that despite the horrible genocide going in Gaza, and despite the billions of dollars the United States has sent to Israel, the Palestinian resistance still remains strong. Israel has caused a lot of destruction, but what's received in return is growing alienation from the international community and increasing unpopularity even in Western countries.
Hey man, I'm thinking about moving out of LA. Yeah, you and everyone else. What do you mean? Well, Los Angeles had a big exodus of people recently. Recently? Yeah, more specifically since 2020, Los Angeles actually had some booming population growth. That is until COVID happened. The city famously had some of the strictest regulations in the nation, and people left and didn't come back. Oh, okay, makes sense. It's pretty wild. The city actually erased 20 years of growth in only 4 years. Okay, but then why is traffic still so bad on the 405 that I can finish the entire K-pop Demon Hunter soundtrack during my commute? I can't relate. I just have Golden on repeat.
The white population has taken a massive decline.
Before I say the ignorant shit that I'm about to say, that I probably shouldn't say, but I'm gonna say it anyway. One, I need you to turn off your cognitive dissonance and implicit bias and just go with me. Barring outside factors that clear as day could affect fertility, white people don't procreate with each other well. John and Sarah might fall in love and get engaged and get married, but they might never like have a child together. But what'll end up happening is that Sarah will go up the street to dark-skinned Deontay house, blink 3 times, all of a sudden she's pregnant with a kid that's about my color. And what John will do is he'll go all the way across town and get Maria and Ling Ling pregnant and turn around and have a kid that's kind of tan, or like have a kid with like Asian features. Either way, the children from any of these 3 different unions are not 100% white, nor are they 100% anything else. They are mixed. I have reason to believe that's like that because black people are like almost 20% of this country's population, and we breed a lot. And then you have all these Hispanic people who are coming up right behind us, and they breed more than we do, on top of all the other immigrants from other parts of the world coming right here and have been coming here in mass, since the mid 2000s? It's seeming like a sort of ethno and cultural shift in the country that no one's really talking about. But again, I don't know. The study shows that people need to have 2.7 kids per household in the United States to the people in the United States to avoid extinction. And I don't know. I'm just your humble American citizen, black guy, mind you, in his 30s, married, own a home in the suburbs, mind you, no kids. And as someone who can afford kids, haven't had them yet, wait until I hit a year of marriage, coming up in November. And I don't know, maybe I'm just a stupid American, but hey, government, you want to keep living? You want to keep having people to govern over? Give people a reason to want to live and reproduce. How do you do that? Simple. Everything being expensive? Let's start with that. Drop the price.
So I'm just going to say what can't be said. MAGA is quietly being fueled by the declining white birth rate. The population shift is upon us, and the right wing is profiteering by lying and fear-mongering about its causes. This is low-key the most important video I've made to this date, and if you don't stay to the end, you're going to miss out on something valuable. But yeah, the 2020 U.S. Census Bureau assessment says that non-Hispanic whites are due to be a minority in this country by the year 2045. That's a mere 21 years away. A healthy replacement birth rate is 2.1 children per woman. If you slip to 1.9, you can recover, but it takes 80 years to do. Nobody's ever recovered from 1.8, and the current replacement rate for white Americans right now, the birth rate, is 1.6 children per woman. Studies show that white people who are aware of this phenomenon have an increased probability of having hostile viewpoints towards minorities and immigrants. Canadian journalist Margaret Went wrote that nations that have been upended by right-wing populism all have one thing in common. They are all facing white demographic decline. That's probably why in 2022, the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, held their conference not in America, but in Hungary. There, the right-wing dictator of that country, Viktor Orban, spoke about how he don't let any of that wokeness happen in his country. But his speech wasn't the most telling. It was actually Matt Schlapp, the president at the time of CPAC. Right there in front of everybody, Matt Schlapp connected the fears of a white replacement with their stance on abortion. He said, if you're worried about this quote-unquote replacement, why don't we start with allowing our own people to live? He referred to the scuttling of Roe versus Wade as, quote, a good start. Schlapp also said, if you say there's a population problem in the country, but you're killing millions of your own people every year through legalized abortion every year, if that were to be reduced, some of that problem is solved. Who is he referring to as like your own people? Some will say, no, he wasn't talking about white people, he was talking about Americans, but that doesn't quite track. You see, if the majority population of America birth replacement rate is 1.6 children per woman, then how did our population grow 7.4% between 2010 and 2020? The answer? Immigration. And based on Schlapp's other stances, I don't think that it's immigrants who he's referring to as his own people. The Great Replacement is not the first time I've heard about white Americans' fear of changing demographic. The first time I heard about it is when I went undercover in the alt-right. There, they referred to it as something different, white genocide. Now, if you frame something as genocide, the only logical response to that genocide is war. If you think that immigrants and race mixing and LGBTQ folks are the reason for this quote-unquote genocide, then of course you're going to respond with boots on the ground. Maybe that's why you have far-right militants training for this mythical race war they're all preparing for. Maybe that's why you have groups of masked vigilantes showing up to drag shows. Maybe that's why in Project 2025 they describe deporting millions of immigrants by force and deploying the military to the border. But if race mixing and mass immigration and LGBTQ issues are causing the white population to drop, why is China's population plummeting just as fast when none of these factors are present? Oh yeah, you didn't know? Yeah, their population is collapsing. Some people say, well yeah, that's because they got rid of all their girls a generation ago. Okay, maybe they did, but Japan didn't. Their population is crashing. You think they got it bad? The lowest birth rate on Earth? South Korea, 0.84 replacement rate. Negligible immigration, no BLM, no trans kids with purple hair defending their pronouns. So what's going on? Just maybe the culprit is not white genocide, but another little-known phenomenon known as demographic winter. In societies with higher education, people delay having kids. And specifically, women don't lay up as broodmares for their husband. Their reproductive cycle shortens because they're pursuing like self-actualization and education, and they have less children. That's it. It's no coincidence that the countries with the highest births per women have the lowest education for those women. So what does Matt Schlapp and the conservatives do? Try to regain control of population through legislation, starting with abortion. Maybe get laws passed that end no-fault divorces, even though when you have no-fault divorce, female suicides drop by 20%. Maybe wage a culture war against queer folks, even though queer folks actually still be having kids. And even though the border is broken and does need to be fixed, fixing it ain't gonna solve this problem. But look at how they've radicalized people into thinking that it will. You got people using the wrong tool for the wrong job and ending up becoming the very folks in history that they don't want to hear about. Damn. What will raise the native-born American population? Actually, a livable wage sooner. All you hear from young people is, I would love to have kids, I would love to get married, I'd love to be stable, I just can't afford it. See, if you raise a country's wealth and you raise expenses, that suppresses the birth rate. But if you raise the wealth in childbearing age and decrease the cost of having kids, well, that explodes the birth rate. And we know this because we did this after World War II, and it caused the baby boomer generation. Pound for pound, take-home pay when adjusted to inflation was about 4 times as it is today. That generation wasn't stable enough to have a lot of children because they was trading crypto and had OnlyFans and was driving Uber and was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. No, the economy was set up that one income could take care of the entire family with savings and retirement. In other words, if you have a livable wage at a young age, ease debt burden, and subsidize the cost of having kids, those kids will be happy. But all of these measures have been called socialist by the same people who want the native-born population to grow. Irony. Now, by the end of this culture war, that's the wrong tool for this problem. You're going to be them people in history that your descendants going to want to distance themselves from, being all ashamed of your actions that you take today, trying to save your population tomorrow. When all you had to do was make American life livable for all Americans. I'm Theo E.J. Wilson. Till
a little bit. I only got a left hand. Long story short, I don't want to get into it. My right is going to be out of commission for like a week, but I'm going to dive into this video because I'm here reading, and this article, a lot of information caught my attention. The U.S. birth rate. So this is where I'm going to go with the topic. So, but before I continue, I want you guys to look at this graph. Okay, now you've seen the graph. Anyway, guys, the largest the U.S. birth rate have ever been was right before World War II. It was at like 3.9. Keep in mind, for the U.S. to sustain a consistent civilization, the birth rate has to be 2.1. Okay? Now we're at 1.6. I'm going to repeat that. We're now at 1.6. We have been in decline since between 2006 to 2007. No one's talking about this. Japan, even worse than the US decline. China, worse. Australia, worse. Folks, I have one question to ask. I'm in a lot of pain right now, so bear with me. And I guess my brain will get discombobulated a little bit because I'm on some, I took some Tylenol. So, for the pain. So bear with me, guys, if I get all over the place a little bit. But anyway, How is it that if you ask Google, are we having a population increase? They said yes. Everywhere you go and ask this question on any website, the population is growing. I show you a graph of the US population. It's been in decline for close to 20 years. How is it a population that's in decline growing? The math doesn't add up, correct? Anyone can see that, right? The thing, I'm just bringing it to your attention, folks. This decline is going to accelerate. And if you can dig into this a little bit more, please do. I don't want to get too much into it. I don't want to mention anything. I don't want to say too much on this video because they tend to flag my video. But I'm just bringing it up so you guys can. I plant the seeds and whatever you guys want to do with it. You can, if it resonates with you, do more research on it. Even Elon Musk said it, that if the birth rate is way below than what is expected to make the nation continue, you're not going to have any nation. Wall Street Journal said the same thing. If your birth rate is below than what's required to let the civilization continue of that nation, if it's below it, it's not going to happen. You're going to die on the vine. And the crazy part about the birth rate, guys, 55% of the people who are having kids at this point, Hispanic. I'm going to repeat that one more time. 55% of the people that are having kids right now, they're Hispanic. So in 20 years, if you don't know Spanish, you're screwed. Everywhere is going to be speaking Spanish. They're the only one having kids. Nobody else is having kids. Now you see why they have to let people in. You get it? I don't want to get too much into this. Now you see why they're letting people in this country? Because of the decline in population.
The United States is an empire in decline. And if you look back over the past 100 years, the lessons of history are pretty clear. Declining empires suffer from two things. One, they suffer from what's called micro-militarism abroad. They send troops abroad. In their flailing decline, thinking that some form of military intervention will recapture the global power that is slipping away from their hands. And then domestically, the other thing they suffer from, every single declining empire over the past 100 years, the Soviet Empire, British Empire, the Spanish, all the rest, they suffer from coups. So as American politics become increasingly contorted and irrational, I think the thing to do is to realize that we are an empire in decline and we are writhing in this kind of irrationality, particularly in the international realm, and it will continue for another decade or two until the power, American power, finally slips away.
Let's face it, the United States is a failing nation. The actions of the Trump administration aren't actions of power, they're actions of desperation. The U.S. has been in decline for years, but now with the spray-tan Sultan in charge, the collapse of the U.S. is being expedited to its destructive end. The country has crippling economic debt that is unsustainable. You got tribal politics where winning is more important than governing. Wealth inequality where millions are one emergency away from economic collapse, while the yacht-owning class tells everyone else, oh, things are improving. The credibility of the U.S. across the world is nosediving into a cesspool of corruption. The U.S. is eating itself while the world moves on. It now resembles Germany, not in 1942, but the years between 1933 and 1936, where the people still had a chance of reversing the events and stopping the regime from taking the country to its destructive end. The system is rigged and everybody knows it. Profit is more valued than human life, where healthcare, housing, food, and education are treated as revenue streams instead of necessities. None of this is sustainable, and ultimately, if left to those who are currently running the gong show that is America, it will bring the entire system crashing down. And whether it's done that way or by its citizens, maybe that's what needs to happen.
With very few exceptions, empires last about 250 years, and the United States is right on schedule. So, according to John Glubb's theory, empires go through 6 stages over about 250 years. And looking back, he might just be right. The Arab Caliphate lasted about 250 years, the Mughal Empire about 240, the Dutch Golden Age around 220 years, the Habsburg Empire roughly 250, and the British Empire just over 250. The US has followed Glubb's 6 stages. It starts with the Age of Pioneers, followed by the Age of Conquest, Commerce, Affluence, Intellect, and finally, the Age of Decadence. America's Age of Pioneers from 1776 to 1850 was a time of energetic founding, idealism, revolutionary spirit, risk-taking, included the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, Lewis and Clark's expeditions, amazing and exciting times for the new country. Then the Age of Conquest, when the empire expands, grows its military, and consolidates its borders. This had the tragic Indian Removal Act of 1830, the annexation of Texas, the Mexican-American War, the California Gold Rush, and the Spanish-American War in 1898. Then the Age of Commerce from 1890s to 1945, when trade, infrastructure, and industry boom. This is the American Industrial Revolution, the Transcontinental Railroad, the Roaring Twenties. President Coolidge said in 1925, quote, "The chief business of the American people is business." That was followed by the Age of Affluence, 1945 through the 1970s, a time of mass prosperity, rising consumption with the GI Bill, suburban housing boom, rapid growth of the middle class, consumer culture, the rising consumption, and a wonderful time of optimism, especially if you were white. This was followed by the Age of Intellect, with rapid innovation, intense public debate, and ideological splintering. In the US, it was Silicon Valley, computers, the internet, AI, and culture wars. And finally, the Age of Decadence, from about 2000 to today. This is the end time of unsustainable debt, materialism, bureaucracy, the loss of civic virtue, and military overreach. The US debt is currently at 36 trillion, trust in government at 22%. The US population is in two hostile camps. The American president attacks other countries with no consultation. The US military is on the US streets, arresting US citizens. People disappear in unmarked cars by unidentified masked agents of the government. If Glubb's theory looks like it's right on schedule, it is. The question isn't will the US fall, it's how many years or months does it have left?
All right, so let's try to break this down, slowly and properly. First of all, this is not about emotional anti-American talk. No, this is about numbers and about data and projections. So maybe let's start with the demographic reality. Demographics is about the U.S. population, and the U.S. population is still growing, but it's growing much slower than it has always it has been before. Reports are showing that birth rates are now, below replacement level. That means American families, like most Western countries, actually, it's not just a case of, it's just an American case, but most Western countries are not having as enough children to sustain population growth in the long term or in the long run. When we talk about replacement level, is that people dying are much more than people being born. And that has consequences in the long run into the economy. So what has really been keeping America growing and going, we can actually say it is all it's immigration. Immigration has really played a big part in importing the workforce, even when the American population has been slow in terms of growth. So for decades, we know that this has been America's secret advantage. When Europe was aging and has been aging, when Japan is also another case, has shrunk and the population has completely stagnated, what America did is imported talent, the best of the best, actually. We have always known that America takes the cream de la cream from across the world: scientists, engineers, doctors, tech founders, skilled laborers and students. America has always has had this charm of importing or attracting the best of the best. And that has had really the US, going for some time. That constant inflow kept the workforce young, vibrant, and it kept innovation going. And of course, it has kept the economy of the US much, much more dynamic. And but now immigration has obviously, as we all know, has significantly slowed. And because it's not just a matter of illegal immigration, even the legal paths of people finding their ways to the US, like they used to, have become much more uncertain, and to be honest, very, very politicized at this point. And maybe here is the deeper issue. Top students around the world that once saw America as the ultimate destination, and of course, many people, this is what has always fueled the so-called the American dream. These people are now considering other options like Canada, like Europe, Australia, and obviously even China right now, and that's something we cannot ignore. China, So that shift in the top talent, considering other options, not the US being, what it used to be, really matters, because demographics is destiny. And if your working age population slows down, you know what that means? Your economic engine obviously also slows down. And this is ideology. It's not ideology. This is numbers. This is maths. And this is the same case with perfect example, Japan, where the economy is now facing a stagnation because the working demographics is not there, has really shrunk, and they're now trying to find means to counter that. But it's not easy. It's not easy, especially for a country like Japan, where immigration is really hard into, for US it has been a bit easier before, but now we're also seeing a case in which America is also making it very hard for immigration to take place. Now, let's talk about this economic, slowdown. The US is still the largest single national economy in the world, obviously, and let's be very clear about that. But projections show something important and something different, that long-term growth is expected to be slower than in the previous decades. And you ask yourself, why? Economic growth really, for any country, and for the US, depend on two things: labor force growth and productivity, which are very intertwined. The two terms are really intertwined. If your labor force grows slower, or because your population is aging and immigration has declined or has stopped, if it does, then obviously you expect that your GDP or your economic growth will slow, will stagnate at some point. And it doesn't really mean a sudden collapse tomorrow. It means gradual erosion of dominance. The US has always dominated, but now that means that's going to not be the case. And at the same time, the global landscape has actually changed, to be honest. China, for example, or China, the perfect example, has risen massively over the last 20, 30 years. Other economies are actually now forming trade partnerships that don't really revolve around the US anymore like it used to be. What we are really seeing is that the world is becoming much more multipolar. And for a country that has been the uncontested leader for nearly a century, or if not more than that, that shift will feel dramatic. That is for the US, And then comes the Trump factor, of course, that we cannot fail to, take note of. And it gets a little sensitive. Under Donald Trump, a lot of things that were once a bit subtle or so not so aggressive have become so loud. Immigration policy has become very aggressive, that we all can agree. And, deportations, detentions have increased, and the rhetoric around all that has really intensified. Supporters might say it's law and order, but critics say it creates instability and fear, even amongst the legal immigrants. US has a lot of legal immigrants, but now they're fearing for their lives. Even Americans themselves have raised concerns with this ICE issue. Legal American citizens are also getting detained and harassed, and brutalized. So this causes instability and fear, and that perception now, and perception really matters. If the world's best minds, the US has always relied on that, start feeling uncertain about coming to America, that affects a lot about innovation, universities, tech, medicine, research, all sectors that have really relied on immigration of the top brass, the top talent. America has always been powerful because it absorbed global talent, best global talent. It has always been where you can go and realize your dreams if you're a tech, starter, if you have interest in any other field, you can go to the US and realize your dreams, and it has always absorbed the best talent in the world, or attracted, and now if that pipeline weakens, then the long-term impact can compound. Now, so is this collapse or is it transition? And let's be honest, America is not finished. Is America finished? No. It still has massive structural advantage. The dollar is still dominant globally, even though it's being fought seriously, and its capital markets are deep. They run deep, and it leads in technology, and of course, still in a lot in military power as it is right now. But here's the key difference: it's no longer, the US is no longer alone at the top as it used to be. It's now not the only, superpower. And when you're used to being the only superpower, sharing space can feel like decline, or it is actually decline. So the question isn't whether America disappears. The question is whether it can adapt to the changing landscapes, global landscapes. Can it maintain openness to still become attractive while enforcing law? Because we're not saying that America must open its doors to illegal immigration. No, that's not the case. But can it still be very attractive to the right people while still now enforcing, its law? Can it stabilize its demographics now that we have seen that, the replacement in terms of replacement of population that has really been dipping? Can it stabilize in its, can it incentivize that people can start getting more children, and so that the dying population can get replaced, faster? Can it compete in a world that is becoming increasingly multipolar, without relying purely on old ways, on old dominance? Yeah. So that's a very interesting conversation that, we need to have, we need to, talk about. And that's my take on it. Do share with me what you think in the comment section below. And I'll really, really appreciate if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.